In this video, I really want to talk to you about what I do when I am struggling out there on the water. I think that no matter how good of an angler you are, you're always going to run into those times out there on the water where you just feel like you cannot generate a bite. And over the years, when I get having that feeling, I've kind of come up with a little dumb saying, which is when in doubt, drag it out. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more, but this has saved me a lot over the years, especially in tournaments where I'm just trying to generate 5 bites over the course of a day. But whether you're a tournament fisherman or you just want to go out there and catch a few fish in the local pond, I think that this can help you, and I'm going to explain it a little bit more in this video. Now, before we get into the video, this one's brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. For the month of June 2024, I am running a sale on the website. It's kind of a package deal. So you can actually get a USA-made sun shirt. I have solid colors, I have pattern colors, and I have a lot of them actually in stock right now. You can get a pair of sun gloves, and you can get a bass hat with a wooden bass badge on it, all for $84 plus free shipping. So you're gonna save some money. It's a great deal. All you gotta do is add the shirt that you like to cart, add the gloves you want to cart, add the hat you want to cart. It will automatically discount at checkout. It is the best way to help support this channel. I will leave links down below, and I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's talk about this. When in doubt, drag it out. Just remember that when you are struggling out there, when in doubt, drag it out. Now, some of you may kind of understand where I'm going to go with this. But before I get into it, what that really means to me is pick up some soft plastics and start fishing them slow. That is what it really means to me. Like if I step back from a 30,000 foot view, that's basically what I'm talking about in this concept. And it's actually very hard for me because as an angler, I have always liked to fish pretty fast. Like I always believe that the best way to catch fish is simply covering a lot of water until you find groups of fish. You look at some of the best anglers in the world, they are the best at covering water, like plain and simple. But when you start to get into kind of like the months that we're coming up on, where it's hot, July, August, September, where it's really, really hot, I have found over the years that sometimes the best thing that you can do is get into areas that have the right ingredients. The right ingredients and slow down in those areas. And what I mean by right ingredients is, if you find an area that has some depth, maybe it has some current, maybe most importantly, it has bait. If you have bait in the area, more than likely there are bass in that area too. But for me, a lot of times I'm loving to pick up a topwater, a chatterbait, a swim bait, something fast. But I've learned over the years, I gotta slow down. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys have maybe experienced this as well. And in those areas, I like to drag it out. Now, there are a couple of baits that I always go to in this situation, and I actually wanna talk about those right now. Now, the first, one of my most favorite ones ever, and probably the one that I pick up first, is a big old 10-inch worm or 11-inch worm. This particular worm right here is an X-Zone Blitz worm. It's an 11-inch worm. I really like this worm because it actually has floating plastic in it. For years I used a Zumo Monster, and I still love a Zumo Monster. I've caught probably hundreds, maybe thousands of fish on it. But this bait will actually stand up on the bottom, and I feel like I might get a few extra bites because of that. But it's also a slender bait, so I can actually catch some smaller fish on even a really big worm like this. And a number of years ago, I really saw the power of a big worm like this fishing a local body of water where it only takes like 8 to 10 pounds to win tournaments. Like there are not a lot of big fish there. And I was actually able to catch more fish, get more bites than guys that I knew that were fishing baits like shaky heads. And I was fishing a big worm like this, catching 12, 13, 14-inch fish. So the big worm, it may at times be a little intimidating, but you can catch a ton of fish on this bait. Now, for me, if I am fishing around largemouth, like this is gonna be what I pick up, especially if it is largemouth in cover. If I'm fishing off the bank grass, maybe it's a stump, maybe it's a brush pile, even rock, I'm gonna pick this bait up and toss it around. One, because it's extremely weedless. I can bring it through anything. Also, I typically have a fairly heavy weight, usually a 3 ounce or a 1/2 ounce weight. So I can actually, even though I'm dragging this bait, I can fish it and cover water fairly effectively, which again, I think is really, really important, but I do like to drag it out. And like I said, you will just get a lot of bites on a big worm, probably even more than you are expecting to get. So this is one of the first things that I pick up, like I said, especially if I'm fishing around largemouth. Now, the next thing that I'm gonna pick up a lot, probably the one that gets the most bites, is a drop shot. A drop shot is by far, in my opinion, one of the best baits for bass fishing, period. And that's a big statement. Like, this thing catches fish in clear water and in muddy water. It catches them in shallow water and extremely deep water. It's just a very versatile bait. There is no time of the year where I do not have a drop shot on the front deck of my boat. Now, what I do a lot is I'm just gonna critique my drop shot. I'm gonna cater my drop shot to the areas that I'm fishing. You know, if I'm fishing really deep, maybe I'm fishing, you know, up on Lake Erie, or, you know, I fish on the St. Lawrence River where I'm fishing in 40, 50, 60 foot of water. I'm gonna use, you know, a 1/2 ounce weight, a 3/4 ounce weight at times, and I'm gonna use a nose hooked, smaller plastic worm. Now, this is actually a rig right here that I fish a lot, and this is actually just a little Texposed drop shot rig. So what I have here is actually a little worm hook right there, and I will actually put on one of my favorite drop shot baits, which is the Robo Worm, the Margarita Mutilator straight-tailed worm. This thing catches fish all over the place. Spots, smallmouth, tons of largemouth. This particular setup I fish a ton because I can fish it in a lot of those exact same areas that I just talked about with that big worm, but it just presents that plastic in a little bit different fashion. Instead of that bait being on the bottom, it's suspended up. And I really like to do that, especially in later summer, because, you know, I've dropped a camera down on a lot of fish before, and you will see a lot of these fish that are simply positioned higher on structure. So instead of being on the bottom, they are 2 foot off the bottom, 3 foot off the bottom. So using a drop shot where you can have a 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot leader if you want, helps to bring that bait up to where those bass are. And I think because of that, you will get more bites. So to me, this is one of the best baits. Like, you have got to have one of these tied up. A drop shot is such a good bait to have tied up. Now, the next bait, I actually don't have one with me right here, and that's because it's actually in my truck right now, super tangled up, and that is a Carolina rig. A Carolina rig is different than these plastic baits that we just talked about, because you can fish a Carolina rig in any depth of water, but you are presenting a bait in a weightless manner. If you think about a Carolina rig where you have a plastic bait, you have a long leader, and then you have your weight, you are presenting that particular piece of plastic weightless to the fish. And that is simply, that at times, a Carolina rig is going to get more bites than both of these other baits that I just talked about, because it looks way more natural to a fish. It looks extremely natural to a fish. Even though you're using maybe a 1 ounce weight, you know, and dragging across the bottom, that bait is still just kind of gliding down there. And that gliding motion, man, it looks so natural to a fish. Now, my favorite bait to use on the end of a Carolina rig, it kind of depends on the fishery, but overall, my favorite bait is a Zoom speed crawl. Especially if you're fishing for smallmouth, you can't hardly beat that. But even if you're fishing for the other species out there, man, a Zoom speed crawl is so deadly on the back of the Carolina rig. And so the big thing with Carolina rigs is kind of like a drop shot. I will critique my Carolina rig for the fishery that I am fishing. I've used Carolina rigs in ponds. Now, some of you may think that that is crazy, but I've used kind of like what I call mini Carolina rigs in ponds, because guess what? There's ponds out there where it can be tough to get bit. There's a pond that I grew up on that it's, you know, it's 10 foot deep at the max for the most part. But in the summer, after I'd been fishing it almost every day growing up, it would be hard to get bit out there, even on baits like a drop shot. And I would pick up the Carolina rig at that point, and I would use a Carolina rig. And I would, like I said, I critiqued it. So instead of using a 1 ounce weight like I do in a lot of bigger lakes, I was using a 3/8 ounce weight. So something that was smaller, that wasn't gonna dig too much into the bottom and the scum and the gunk that's on the bottom. Something that's lighter, but also still presents that bait in a weightless manner. Now, you also may be fishing really deep, you know, like I said, and you can get away with that 1 ounce bait, you know, maybe in a lake or a river or wherever it may be. So critique your rigs for the bodies of water that you are fishing. But anyways, guys, I just want you to know that that's what I do. When I am struggling, I try to slow down in areas that I truly believe have bass and just soak a bait. Drag those baits slowly down there on the bottom, because when in doubt, drag it out, catch some bass, generate some bites, and it can be a good day. And all those techniques, you can catch big ones on. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you might like my most recent one right here. Also, you can check out Fin Fishing right here. I will see you guys tomorrow.